The great chamber stretched out like a metal valley filled with strange sounds. Alien voices clicked, hummed, and rumbled in dozens of different languages. Some creatures looked like walking crystals that sparkled in the light. Others had, too, many arms or eyes that glowed in the dark. A few floated in the air inside clear bubbles filled with purple gas. Elena Vasquez stood at the smallest table in the entire room. Her hands shook a little as she held the papers that could change everything for humanity. For 300 years, humans had sat at this tiny table while the older alien species took the best parts of the galaxy for themselves. The room smelled like metal and something that reminded Elena of burnt flowers. She tried not to wrinkle her nose. After 5 years as Earth's main speaker to the Galactic Council, she still could not get used to some of the alien smells. Behind her sat the other human representatives. There was Dr. Martinez from the Science Division, Admiral Chen from the Defense Force, and Trade Representative Johnson. They all looked nervous. Elena did not blame them. Today's meeting would decide if humanity got the shipping routes they desperately needed. Earth's colonies were struggling. The alien trade rules made it almost impossible to move supplies between human worlds. Ships had to take long, dangerous routes through empty space. Many supply runs took months longer than they should. Some colonies were running out of basic medicines and food. All Elena wanted was access to 3 hyperspace lanes. These were like highways through space that made travel much faster. The problem was that an alien group called the Zeltharian Trade Consortium controlled most of these routes. They had claimed thousands of lanes, but only used a few dozen. The 3 routes humanity wanted had been empty for over 50 years. High Counselor Zektar sat at the biggest table in the center of the room. His body looked like it was made of living crystal that changed colors as he moved. Right now, his crystal form showed deep blue patterns, which Elena had learned meant he was bored or annoyed. Elena walked forward and bowed slightly, following the formal rules. Honored counselors, I come before you today with a modest request from humanity. Several aliens at nearby tables made sounds that might have been laughter. It sounded like breaking glass mixed with metal scraping on stone. Elena's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice steady. Our colonies face supply shortages due to the current shipping restrictions. We request access to hyperspace lanes 447 Alpha, 448 Beta, and 451 Gamma. These routes have been unused for decades and would greatly help our people. She held up her data pad, showing the proof. Charts and numbers that showed exactly how much these routes would help. Medical supplies could reach the outer colonies in weeks instead of months. Food shipments could prevent the hunger that was. Starting on 3 different worlds, High Counselor Zektar did not even look up from his own data tablet. The crystal patterns on his body shifted to a dark red color. Proposal denied, he said in a voice that sounded like wind blowing through a cave. Elena felt her heart sink. May I ask why, honored counselor? Humans have failed to demonstrate sufficient maturity for expanded privileges, Zektar replied. His crystal body now showed orange and yellow patterns, which Elena knew meant he was getting more annoyed. Perhaps in another century, when your species learns proper deference to your betters. The chamber filled with that horrible laughing sound again. Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks. Another century? Humans were dying now because they could not get supplies. Children on the frontier colonies were getting sick because medicine took too long to arrive. Counselor Vexhai, who looked like a giant spider made of silver metal, clicked her mechanical legs against the floor. Besides, she said in a voice like static on a radio, what could primitives who only achieved faster-than-light travel 300 years ago possibly offer us? You are babies playing with toys you do not understand. More laughter echoed through the chamber. Elena looked around at the faces of the alien counselors. Some looked amused. Others looked completely bored, as if humanity's problems were less interesting than watching paint dry. A few were not even paying attention, busy with their own conversations. Elena closed her proposal folder. The sound was soft, but somehow it cut through all the noise in the chamber. The laughter stopped. Every alien eye, sensor, and whatever else they used to see turned toward her. "Very well," Elena said. Her voice was calm and steady, even though, inside, she felt like screaming. "Humanity withdraws its petition." She took a deep breath and said the words that would change everything. In fact, humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council entirely. The silence that followed was so complete that Elena could hear her own heartbeat. Even the background hum of the chamber's life support systems seemed to pause. High Counselor Zektar's crystal body shifted to a pale white color that Elena had never seen before. "You cannot be serious," he said. "I am completely serious," Elena replied. She looked around the chamber, meeting as many alien gazes as she could. "For 3 centuries, humanity has tried to work within this system. We have followed every rule, respected every tradition, and accepted every limitation you placed on us. We asked for scraps and were told we did not deserve even those." Admiral Chen stood up behind Elena, followed by Dr. Martinez and Trade Representative Johnson. Their faces were grim, but determined. "If humanity is not mature enough for 3 unused shipping lanes," Elena continued, "then perhaps we are not mature enough for the Galactic Council. We will find our own way." Counselor Vexhigh's mechanical legs clicked rapidly against the floor, making a sound like a machine gun. "You cannot survive without the Council's protection and resources. Your species will collapse within a generation." Elena smiled, but it was not a happy smile. "That remains to be seen. Good day, counselors." She turned and walked toward the exit. The other human representatives followed her. Their footsteps echoed in the silent chamber. Elena could feel hundreds of alien eyes watching them leave, but no one tried to stop them. Just before they reached the door, Elena turned back one last time. "Oh, and counselors? All human personnel will be leaving council space within 72 hours. This includes our scientists, our trade representatives, our cultural attachés, and our research teams. All of them." High Counselor Zektar's crystal body was now flashing between different colors so fast it hurt to look at. "You are making a terrible mistake," he said. "Perhaps," Elena replied, "but it will be our mistake to make." The heavy doors of the council chamber closed behind the humans with a sound like thunder. In the hallway outside, Elena finally allowed herself to shake. What had she just done? She had just pulled humanity out of the only galactic government that existed. No human had ever made such a big decision so quickly. But as she thought about the hungry children on the frontier colonies and the sick people who could not get medicine, Elena felt her resolve strengthen. The council had made it clear that humanity would always be treated as second-class citizens. Maybe it was time to see what humans could accomplish on their own. Behind the closed doors of the council chamber, the aliens sat in stunned silence. None of them had expected the humans to actually leave. After all, where would they go? What would they do? How could such a young species possibly survive without the guidance and protection of their elders? High Counselor Zektar stared at the empty table where the humans had sat for 3 centuries. For the first time in his very long life, he felt something that might have been doubt. The humans kept their word. Within 3 days, every human ship had left council space. They did not make dramatic speeches or send angry messages. They simply packed up their things and disappeared like morning mist. At first, nobody really noticed. The Galactic Council was huge, with thousands of species and millions of worlds. The humans had always been a small part of it. Their absence seemed like a tiny drop missing from a vast ocean. High Counselor Zektar told himself that the humans would come crawling back within a month. Maybe 2 months at most. Without council protection and trade agreements, Their colonies would start failing. Then they would learn to show proper respect to their betters. The first sign that something was wrong came from an unexpected place. The cafeteria in the council building started serving different food, instead of the rich, dark liquid that many species had become addicted to. There was only a bitter brown substitute that tasted like dirt mixed with regret. "Where is the coffee?" demanded Counselor Blexmore, a round creature covered in purple fur. He had been drinking 3 cups of the human beverage every morning for the past 50 years. The food service manager, a nervous 6-armed being called Kept Tall, wrung 4 of his hands together. "The humans provided all coffee to council space. Honored Counselor. With their departure, we have no more supply." Blexmore stared at his cup of brown liquid with growing horror. Coffee had become part of his daily routine. Worse, he had been serving it to important visitors from his home world. Now he would have to explain why he could no longer offer them this wonderful drink. The same problem appeared with chocolate, another human export that had become surprisingly popular. Something called whiskey had been the favorite drink at diplomatic parties for decades. Now the bottles were empty, and no one knew how to make more. But these were just small luxuries. The real problems started showing up in the weekly reports that came to High Counselor Zektar's office. Director Morgeth of the Galactic Medical Consortium looked confused as he read his latest research summary. Several important projects had suddenly stopped moving forward. The team studying Zeltharian bone diseases had no idea how to continue their work. The research into Vorthak immune systems had hit a dead end. The promising investigation into cross-species organ transplants had completely fallen apart. "I do not understand," Morgeth told his assistant, a tall, thin creature with green skin. "All these projects were making good progress last month." His assistant checked the data files. "Director, it appears that Dr. Sarah Chen was involved in all of these projects." "Dr. Chen, the human xenobiologist? But she was just doing basic research, nothing important." The assistant pulled up more files. "Actually, Director, she was the connecting link between all our major research teams. Her work on cellular regeneration was being used by the bone disease team. Her immune system studies were essential for the organ transplant project. Her genetic research was helping 6 different species understand their own biology better." Director Morgeth felt a cold feeling in his stomach. Dr. Chen had always been quiet and polite. She attended meetings, shared her research freely, and never asked for credit or recognition. Everyone had assumed her work was just academically interesting, but not really useful. Now they were discovering that she had been weaving connections between different species' medical knowledge that no one else had seen. Her research had been the foundation that other projects were built on. Without her, dozens of important medical advances had just become impossible. The same realization was happening across the galaxy. Fleet Admiral Crexus noticed that his shipping efficiency reports were showing small problems. At first, he thought it was just normal variation. Sometimes things went a little slower, sometimes a little faster, but the problems kept getting worse. Hyperspace beacons that usually worked perfectly started giving wrong directions. Navigation computers that had never made mistakes began calculating routes that wasted time and fuel. Communication relays that had operated flawlessly for centuries started having small but annoying delays. Admiral Crexus called his chief engineer, a mechanical being with red glowing eyes. "Engineer Vauxhall, what is wrong with our systems? Everything is working, but nothing is working well." Engineer Vauxhall checked his data screens. "Admiral, I have been investigating this problem. It appears that humans had been providing small maintenance services throughout Council space. They updated navigation databases, performed minor repairs on communication equipment, and provided backup systems for critical infrastructure." "That is impossible," the Admiral said. "Humans barely understand our technology. They could not have been maintaining our systems." "With respect, Admiral, that is what I thought too. But the evidence is clear. Humans had been doing small jobs that no one else wanted to do. cleaning sensor arrays, updating software, replacing worn components. Each job was tiny and seemed unimportant, but there were thousands of these jobs happening every day. Admiral Crexus stared at his efficiency reports. The numbers kept getting worse. What had started as a 0.3% decrease in performance had grown to 2.7% in just 1 month. If this continued, the entire Council transportation system would slow down significantly. But how was this possible? Humans were supposed to be the primitive ones. They were supposed to need help from the older, wiser species. They were not supposed to be quietly holding the galaxy together with thousands of small, invisible tasks. On the planet Zelthera Prime, Trade Master Quintel discovered that his profit margins were shrinking. At first, he blamed market fluctuations or increased competition. But when he investigated further, he found something disturbing. For centuries, humans had been providing small services that made trade more efficient. They had created databases that helped match buyers with sellers. They had developed software that optimized shipping routes. They had even been providing translation services that helped different species communicate better during negotiations. Humans had never charged much for these services. In fact, they had often provided them for free, claiming they were just trying to be helpful members of the galactic community. The other species had assumed this was because humans were eager to please their betters. Now, Trade Master Quintel realized that humans had been essential to the smooth operation of galactic commerce. Without their databases, their software, and their translation services, trade was becoming more difficult and less profitable every day. Similar discoveries were happening everywhere. Human agricultural specialists had been providing food security, advice to dozens of worlds. Human engineers had been designing more efficient mining equipment. Human teachers had been training alien students in subjects that no one had realized were important. The humans had not been taking the important jobs. They had been doing the jobs that no one else wanted to do. The boring jobs. The maintenance jobs. The jobs that seemed unimportant until they were not being done anymore. High Counselor Zektar sat in his office, reading report after report of small problems that were adding up to big headaches. Coffee shortages, research projects stalling, transportation delays, trade inefficiencies, equipment failures. Each individual problem was minor, but together they painted a picture that made Zektar's crystal body turn a sickly yellow color. The humans had not been the helpless children he had assumed they were. They had been quietly making themselves essential to the operation of galactic civilization, and now they were gone. Counselor Vexhai visited Zektar's office, her mechanical legs clicking nervously on the floor. "Have you heard from the humans?" she asked. "Do we know where they went?" Zektar shook his crystal head. "Our sensors show that human ships left Council space, but then they simply vanished. They are either using technology we do not recognize, or they have gone somewhere beyond our detection range. That is impossible," Vexahai said. "Human technology is centuries behind ours. They cannot have developed better stealth systems or longer-range travel capabilities." But even as she said it, both counselors were beginning to wonder if their assumptions about human capabilities had been completely wrong. The attack came from the dark spaces between galaxies, where ancient nightmares had been sleeping for thousands of years. The Void Stalkers had tried to invade the galaxy many times before, but they had always been stopped by the Great Containment grid that surrounded the outer rim of Council space. The containment grid was a network of energy barriers and automated defense platforms that had been built over many centuries. It was supposed to be impossible to break. The greatest minds of a dozen species had worked together to create it. It had protected the galaxy for 2,000 years. But now, 17 sections of the grid failed at exactly the same time. Emergency alarms screamed across every military base in Council space. Admiral Thaxon, the Council's top military commander, was pulled from his sleep by urgent messages. His forearms moved quickly as he activated communication systems and called for immediate response teams. "All units, code absolute emergency," he broadcast to the fleet. Void Stalker breakthrough in the Outer Rim. Deploy rapid response forces immediately. Admiral Thaxon was a Kethmari, a species that had been fighting wars for millions of years. His people were famous for their military skill and their bioships that could heal themselves after battle. He had never lost a fight against any enemy the galaxy had faced, but when his fleet reached the breach points, something was terribly wrong. The Void Stalkers looked the same as they always had. They were dark creatures that seemed to be made of living metal and hungry shadows. Their ships were twisted things that hurt to look at directly, but their behavior was completely different. In every previous invasion, the Void Stalkers had attacked randomly, using brute force and overwhelming numbers. They were dangerous because they were relentless and hard to kill, not because they were smart. This time, they moved with perfect coordination. They seemed to know exactly where every council ship would be. They targeted weak points that should have been secret. They used tactics that countered every defense the council forces tried to use. Admiral Thaxon watched in horror as his bioships were systematically destroyed. The Void Stalkers aimed their weapons at specific points on each ship's hull, places that would cause maximum damage with minimum effort. They had somehow learned the exact anatomy of Kethmari vessels. His energy weapons, which had always been effective against Void Stalker armor, scattered harmlessly off their hulls. The creatures had developed new protective systems that seemed designed specifically to stop Kethmari weapon technology. When Admiral Thaxon's psychic warfare specialists tried to disrupt the enemy's coordination, their mental attacks were not just blocked. They were turned around and sent back, driving several of his psychics insane with reflected terror. "This is impossible," Admiral Thaxon said to his chief tactical officer. "How do they know our weaknesses so precisely?" His tactical officer, a young Kethmari with bright green markings, checked her data systems. "Admiral, their defensive adaptations appear to be based on detailed knowledge of our military capabilities. They know not just our weapon types, but our tactical doctrines, our ship designs, and even our psychological warfare methods. The same disaster was happening across all 17 breach points. Every species that responded to the emergency found that the Void Stalkers had somehow learned to counter their specific advantages. The Zeltharian crystal ships, normally nearly indestructible, shattered like glass when hit by weapons that vibrated at exactly the right frequency. The Vorthak stealth vessels were detected and destroyed by sensors that should not have been able to see them. The Mentari mind control abilities were blocked by mental shields that the Void Stalkers had never possessed before. Within hours, the Council's rapid response fleet was in full retreat. Thousands of ships had been destroyed or damaged. The Void Stalkers were advancing into Council space faster than anyone had thought possible. Emergency sessions of the Galactic Council ran day and night. The Great Chamber was full of panicked voices as species representatives demanded answers and solutions. Councillor Vexhai stood before the assembly, her mechanical legs tapping frantically. "The pattern is clear," she announced. "The Void Stalkers have somehow gained detailed intelligence about every major species' military capabilities. They know our strengths and weaknesses better than we know them ourselves." High Counselor Zektar's crystal body flickered through rapidly changing colors as he processed this information. "How is such a thing possible? Our military secrets are protected by the highest levels of security." It was Counselor Blexmore who made the connection that everyone had been afraid to make. His purple fur had turned a pale gray color, which among his people indicated extreme distress. "The humans," he said quietly. "Dr. Sarah Chen's research projects." The chamber fell silent. Vexhai's mechanical clicking stopped. Zektar's color changes froze on a deep, worried blue. "Explain," Zektar commanded. Blexmore activated a holographic display that showed Dr. Chen's published research papers from the past 50 years. Look at what she was studying. Kethmari biological systems and regeneration capabilities, Zeltharian crystal matrix structures, Vorthak stealth technology principles, Mentari psychic defense mechanisms. He highlighted connections between different papers. She was not just studying these things individually, she was mapping the relationships between different species' biological and technological systems. Every weakness, every strength, every dependency. Counselor Vexahai's voice became a harsh, static whisper. You are suggesting that the human researcher was spying on us. Not spying, Blexmore corrected. Everything she studied was freely shared information. We gave her access to our research because she was a council member in good standing. She attended joint research conferences, participated in cultural exchanges, worked on collaborative projects with scientists from every major species. The horrible truth began to settle over the assembled counselors like a suffocating blanket. For 3 centuries, humans had been members of the Galactic Council. They had been given access to databases, research facilities, and cultural programs that were open to all member species. Everyone had assumed that humans were learning from their more advanced neighbors. The humans had seemed eager to understand alien technology and biology. They had asked many questions and participated enthusiastically in every educational opportunity. But what if the humans had not been learning from the galaxy's elder species? What if they had been learning about them? Dr. Chen's research was just the tip of the iceberg. Human cultural attachés had spent centuries studying alien psychology and social structures. Human trade representatives had mapped economic dependencies and resource flows. Human military observers had attended war games and training exercises as part of standard diplomatic exchanges. The humans had been building a comprehensive database of galactic civilizations' capabilities and vulnerabilities, not by stealing or spying, but by being enthusiastic students who asked good questions and shared their findings through proper academic channels. And then they had left council space, taking all that knowledge with them. The Void Stalkers, Zektar said slowly, his crystal body now completely colorless. You believe the humans are working with them? Worse, said a new voice from the back of the chamber. Junior Archivist Pel Oth stepped forward, her small frame shaking with nervous energy. I do not think the humans are working with the Void Stalkers. I think they created the current version of the Void Stalkers. The chamber erupted in panicked sounds. Chittering, harmonizing, mechanical grinding, and psychic static filled the air as hundreds of representatives tried to speak at once. Peloth raised her voice above the chaos. The humans had access to Void Stalker specimens from previous invasions. Dr. Chen published 3 papers on Void Stalker biology in the past decade. She was officially studying them to help develop better defenses. The archivist activated another display showing the timeline of human research activities. But what if she was not just studying how to defend against them? What if she was studying how to improve them? High Counselor Zektar's crystal body began to emit a low, mournful tone that made everyone in the chamber feel deeply afraid. The humans had not just walked away from the council's table. They had taken everything they had learned and used it to create the perfect weapon against their former colleagues. The Void Stalkers were no longer just ancient nightmares from beyond the galaxy. They had become guided missiles, each one precisely designed to destroy the species that had once looked down on humanity as primitive and immature. And they were winning. 3 months after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council controlled less than 60% of their former territory. The news got worse every day. Entire star systems had gone silent. Ancient worlds that had been safe for thousands of years were now battlefields or graveyards. The Void Stalkers moved through council space like a plague that had learned to think. They did not just attack randomly anymore. They struck at exactly the right targets, in exactly the right order to cause maximum chaos and fear. They hit food production centers first, causing supply shortages that forced military ships to escort cargo vessels instead of fighting. They destroyed communication hubs in patterns that isolated different species from each other, preventing coordinated defense efforts. They targeted medical facilities and research stations, eliminating the ability to develop new countermeasures. Every attack showed impossible knowledge of how galactic civilization actually worked. The Void Stalkers were not just winning battles. They were systematically dismantling the infrastructure that made the Council possible. But worse than the Void Stalkers were the new reports coming from the edges of Council space. Scout ships that managed to return brought stories that made hardened military officers wake up screaming. Captain Darweneth was a veteran reconnaissance pilot who had seen combat in 6 different wars. Her species, the Corvani, had naturally enhanced senses that made them perfect for scouting missions. She had volunteered to investigate strange readings from the Kepler expanse, an area of space that had been empty the last time anyone checked. What she found there changed everything. "Command, this is Scout Ship Talon's Edge," Captain Darweneth transmitted from the edge of the expanse. Her voice was shaking, which was unusual for a Corvani. "I am transmitting visual data now. You need to see this." The images that came through, the quantum communication link showed something that should not have existed. Where empty space had been just months before, there was now a thriving civilization. Dozens of star systems buzzed with activity. Massive construction platforms built ships at a rate that seemed impossible. Space stations the size of moons orbited worlds that had been transformed into garden paradises. But the most shocking thing was not the scale of the construction. It was the technology. The ships moving through these systems were clearly of human design. They had the clean lines and efficient layouts that marked human engineering. But they also incorporated elements that were obviously borrowed from other species. There were vessels with Zeltharian crystal hulls that sparkled like diamonds, ships with Vorthak stealth systems that flickered in and out of visibility, fighters that moved with the biological fluidity of Kethmari bioships, massive carriers that used Mentari psychic coordination systems to control their fighter squadrons with perfect precision. "How is this possible?" Captain Darweneth whispered into her communicator. "These are human colonies, but the technology, it is everything. Every major council species' best designs, all combined into hybrid vessels." Her long-range sensors picked up energy signatures that made no sense. The power systems were clearly based on human fusion technology, but they had been enhanced with Christine computational matrices and Vorthak dark energy manipulators. The result was technology that was more advanced than anything any single species had achieved. As Captain Darweneth moved closer to get better readings, her ship was detected. A squadron of human fighters moved to intercept her, but they did not attack immediately. Instead, a communication came through on standard council frequencies. "Unknown vessel, this is Commander Jackson of the Terran Defense Force. You are entering human territorial space. State your intentions." The voice was calm and professional, but there was something underneath it that made Captain Darweneth's enhanced senses detect danger. This was not the voice of someone who was afraid or desperate. This was the voice of someone who was completely confident in their ability to handle any threat. "This is Captain Darweneth of the Galactic Council Reconnaissance Division," she replied. "I am conducting a routine survey mission." There was a pause before Commander Jackson responded. "Captain, there is no longer a Galactic Council presence authorized in this region of space. However, as a gesture of goodwill, you will be allowed to complete your survey and return to Council space unharmed. But understand that this courtesy will not be extended again." The human fighters maintained formation around her ship as she completed her scan. They made no aggressive moves, but Captain Darweneth could tell that they were ready to destroy her vessel instantly if she made any hostile action. What her sensors revealed during those tense minutes was even more disturbing than what she had already seen. The human colonies were not struggling outposts trying to survive on their own. They were thriving centers of industry and research that made the greatest council worlds look primitive by comparison. The population readings showed billions of humans living in these systems, but there were also readings for other species. Aliens who had supposedly been extinct for centuries were living alongside humans in apparent harmony. Species that had never been part of the council were contributing their knowledge and abilities to human projects. "My God," Captain Darwineth breathed as she realized what she was seeing. "They are not just building ships. They are building a civilization." As her ship reached the edge of the scanning area, Commander Jackson's voice came through the communicator. "One more time. Captain, please convey a message to your superiors. Humanity bears no ill will toward the species of the former Galactic Council. However, any attempt to interfere with human territorial space or human interests will be met with appropriate response. We hope that is understood." Captain Darwineth began transmitting her final report as she flew back toward Council space. "The human colonies are not struggling anymore. Repeat, the humans are not struggling. They have built an advanced technological civilization that appears to surpass Council capabilities in multiple areas. They have integrated technologies from dozens of species, including some that we believe to be extinct." Her transmission was cut short by a massive energy pulse that fried all her ship's electronic systems. When backup power came online, she found herself drifting in empty space. Every trace of the human civilization she had just observed was gone, hidden behind some kind of cloaking technology that was far beyond anything in the Council's databases. It took Captain Darwineth 3 days to reach the nearest Council outpost using emergency propulsion. By the time she arrived, her report had been classified at the highest levels and she had been ordered never to speak of what she had seen. But word spread anyway, as word always does. Whispered conversations in military barracks spoke of human technology that made Council ships look like ancient relics. Rumors in trade stations told of human colonies that had solved problems of resource scarcity and environmental management that had puzzled other species for millennia. High Counselor Zektar sat in his office, reading classified reports that painted an increasingly terrifying picture. The humans had not just survived their departure from the Council, they had thrived beyond anyone's wildest imagination. Intelligence reports suggested that human territorial space now covered twice as much area as the entire original Council. Their population had somehow increased dramatically, possibly through immigration of species that had never joined the Council or had been thought extinct. Most disturbing of all were the reports of human military capabilities. The few Council ships that had encountered human patrols described vessels that moved faster than anything in the Council fleet, weapons that could punch through any known armor, and defensive systems that seemed to make human ships nearly invulnerable. Counselor. Vexhai visited Zektar's office regularly now, her mechanical legs clicking with nervous energy. "How did we get this so wrong?" she asked during one of these visits. "How did we completely misunderstand what the humans were capable of?" Zektar's crystal body had been stuck on a dull gray color for weeks now, reflecting his deep depression. "We assumed that because they were young, they were also weak. We assumed that because they asked questions, they were ignorant. We assumed that because they accepted small roles, they lacked ambition." He activated a holographic display showing the timeline of human activities within the Council. "Look at this. For 3 centuries, they systematically gained access to every major technology, every important scientific principle, every significant cultural practice in the galaxy. They did it openly, legally, through proper diplomatic channels." Vexhai studied the display with growing horror. They were not learning from us. They were learning us. Every weakness, every strength, every dependency. They mapped our entire civilization. And then they took that knowledge and built something better, Zektar concluded. Something that combines the best aspects of every species while avoiding our individual weaknesses. The 2 counselors sat in silence for a long time, contemplating the magnitude of their mistake. They had treated humanity as a minor species that needed guidance and protection. Instead, they had created a civilization that made the Galactic Council look like a collection of squabbling children. Outside the window of Zektar's office, the lights of the Council capital city flickered as another power grid suffered from lack of human maintenance. The infrastructure the message arrived on every screen in Council space at exactly the same moment. It appeared on military command centers, civilian news networks, personal communication devices, and even emergency broadcast systems. No one had authorized the transmission, and no one could figure out how it had been sent simultaneously across thousands of light years. The face that appeared was familiar to many older council members. Ambassador Elena Vasquez looked older now with silver hair and lines around her eyes, but her gaze was steady and confident in a way that made even hardened warriors step back from their displays. Behind her, through what appeared to be a massive viewport, strange ships moved in formations that seemed to bend space itself. The vessels were clearly human in design, but they incorporated technology that suggested intimate knowledge of every major galactic civilization. Some ships flickered in and out of existence like Vorthak stealth vessels. Others sparkled with the living light of Zeltharian crystal technology. A few moved with the organic fluidity of Kethmari bioships, while maintaining the clean geometric efficiency of human engineering. To the former colleagues of the Galactic Council, Elena began, her voice carrying easily across the vast distances between stars. 6 months ago, you denied humanity access to 3 hyperspace lanes because we lacked maturity. Today, humanity controls 47 star systems that were previously considered unreachable, and our fleets patrol routes that your maps claimed were impossible to navigate. High Counselor Zektar watched from his office, his crystal body cycling through colors too rapidly to track. Around him, emergency alarms indicated that the transmission was somehow bypassing all security protocols and reaching every communication device in Council space. Elena continued, gesturing to the activity behind her. You assumed that because we were the youngest species at your table, we were also the weakest. You were wrong. Youth brings advantages that age often forgets: adaptability, creativity, and the willingness to question assumptions that have not been challenged in millennia. The view shifted to show vast construction platforms where ships were being built at an impossible rate. Humans worked alongside aliens that the Council had never seen before, as well as species that were supposed to have been extinct for centuries. The scale of the operation was staggering. In the few months since humanity's departure, they had built more infrastructure than most Council species managed in decades. While you debated whether we deserved a seat at your table, we built our own table, Elena said. While you parceled out scraps of territory, we found worlds you had overlooked or abandoned. While you maintained the status quo, we innovated. Counselor Vexhai burst into Zektar's office, her mechanical legs clicking frantically against the floor. Can they really be broadcasting to our entire civilization simultaneously? She demanded. Zektar's communication officer, a nervous creature with too many eyes, checked his instruments. The signal appears to be coming from multiple sources distributed throughout the galaxy. Somehow, they have positioned relay stations in locations we cannot detect. Elena's face reappeared on screen, and her expression became more serious. The void stalkers that currently threaten your worlds? We encountered them first, in the deep. Spaces you claimed were empty. We fought them, studied them, and learned to defeat them. The transmission showed split-screen images that made the assembled council members gasp in horror and amazement. On one side, void stalker fleets devastated, council worlds with the precision and knowledge that had made them nearly unstoppable. On the other side, identical void stalker attacks were effortlessly defeated by human vessels using weapons and tactics that seemed almost magical in their effectiveness. Human ships moved through enemy formations like dancers, always in exactly the right position to avoid incoming fire, while delivering devastating attacks to weak points that the Council had never known existed. Void Stalker adaptive armor that had stymied Council weapons for months was pierced easily by human technology that seemed to anticipate every defensive modification. "The knowledge you need to survive this crisis exists," Elena continued. "We have developed countermeasures for every Void Stalker capability. We have created weapons that can penetrate their adaptive defenses. We have discovered tactics that can predict and counter their coordination systems. But it belongs to us now." Admiral Thaxon, watching from his flagship at the front lines of the continuing war, felt his multiple hearts sink as he realized what this meant. Humanity possessed the solutions to the military crisis that was destroying the Council. They had the technology and knowledge that could save billions of lives and preserve galactic civilization, but they were not offering it freely. Elena paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle across the galaxy. When she spoke again, her voice carried the authority of someone who held all the important cards in a deadly game. "Humanity is prepared to share our defensive technologies and tactical knowledge. We are willing to help end the Void Stalker threat and restore peace to the galaxy. Our price is simple: complete restructuring of galactic governance, with humanity as an equal partner." The demands that followed were delivered with calm precision. Humanity wanted equal representation in any new galactic government. They wanted unrestricted access to all hyperspace lanes and trade routes. They wanted the right to establish colonies anywhere they chose, without interference from other species. They wanted recognition of their territorial claims and sovereignty over the systems they had already settled. Most importantly, they wanted an end to the patronizing attitude that had characterized their treatment for 3 centuries. The new galactic order would be based on mutual respect and equal partnership, not on the assumption that older species were automatically wiser or more advanced. "You have 72 hours to respond," Elena concluded. "After that, humanity will consider the Galactic Council to be a failed institution and will proceed with our own plans for galactic security and governance." The transmission shifted to show human fleets patrolling the borders of their territorial space. The ships moved with a confidence and coordination that made it clear they were not bluffing about their capabilities. These were not desperate refugees begging for help. These were the representatives of a rising power that had already surpassed the civilization that had once rejected them. "Choose wisely," Elena said as her image began to fade. "The galaxy is changing whether you accept it or not. You can be part of that change, or you can be replaced by it." The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy in stunned silence. In the council chambers, emergency sessions began immediately. Species representatives argued frantically about how to respond. Some wanted to reject humanity's demands and fight to preserve the old order. Others insisted that accepting the human terms was the only way to survive the current crisis. High Counselor Zektar found himself facing a room of angry, frightened aliens who blamed him for the catastrophe. "You dismissed them!" Counselor Blexmore shouted, his purple fur standing on end. "You called them primitive and immature. Now they hold our entire civilization hostage." "We all agreed with the decision," Zektar replied, but his crystal body showed the pale colors of defeat. "None of us understood what they were truly capable of." Junior Archivist Peloth stepped forward with data that made the situation even clearer. "Honored counselors, I have been analyzing human activities during their time in the council. The Mao pattern is unmistakable. They were not just learning from us. They were systematically acquiring every piece of knowledge, technology, and cultural information that galactic civilization possessed." She activated displays that showed the staggering scope of human intelligence gathering. They attended every cultural exchange program, participated in every joint research project, and volunteered for every diplomatic mission that would give them access to new information. They were the most eager students in galactic history. And "We thought that made them harmless," Vexahai said bitterly. "They were never harmless," Peloth continued. They were patient. For 3 centuries, they accepted inferior treatment while quietly building the knowledge base they would need to surpass us. They turned our own condescension into their greatest weapon. As reports continued to arrive from the front lines, it became clear that the human ultimatum was not an empty threat. Council forces were losing the war against the Void Stalkers. Entire sectors had fallen. Refugee ships crowded the remaining safe systems, carrying news of worlds that had been completely destroyed. Meanwhile, human forces continued to demonstrate their ability to defeat identical Void Stalker attacks with ease. They were not just superior to Council military technology. They were so far ahead that the comparison was embarrassing. Admiral Thaxon sent a message from his flagship that settled the debate once and for all. Council Command, this is Admiral Thaxon. I have just witnessed a human patrol squadron destroy a Void Stalker battle group that our entire fleet could not damage. They did it in less than 10 minutes, with no losses to their own forces. If we do not accept their terms, we will lose this war within months. The vote was held in emergency session. It was not even close. Every species that had survived the cry